we hear something about Robert Johnson singing that I think makes him particularly effective. He has a lot of voice in his voice. Do you know what I mean? Hey y'all, welcome back to the Greg Brownderville Dimension. I'm super excited today because I'm starting a new series called Let's Talk Lyrics. As you know, I'm the lead singer of Beekeeper Spaceman, and part of my job in that indie rock duo is to write lyrics. And I love writing lyrics. It's something I've studied and loved just as an art, as a craft my whole life. So in this series, I'm just going to take up some songs that have meant a lot to me, both personally, but also songs that I've learned a lot from as a lyricist. And today I'm going to talk about a song that goes deep with me. It goes back to my childhood. It's a Robert Johnson song called Love in Vain. I grew up in the Delta in Pumpkin Bend, so this is something that goes back a long way with me and really goes down to my roots. And so it's going to be a pleasure today to talk about Robert Johnson, talk about blues, talk about this song Love in Vain. This song starts out in narrative mode. In the study of literature, we often think of three modes: narrative, storytelling, lyric mode, which is where the speaker or the person talking in the poem or the song is expressing their feelings, their thoughts, their deep feelings, often using imagery. Then we have dramatic mode. That's more like a play almost, where you have dialogue, characters interacting with each other. And in general, I want to help you think about song lyrics in juxtaposition with literature in this series, Let's Talk Lyrics, because some of y'all are writing lyrics. And one way that you can get a lot better is to read more poetry and learn more about poetry. So I'm gonna try to help you do that by comparing some poems to the song lyrics we talk about. And I'll be talking about these literary modes because what Robert Johnson does in this song is virtuosic in any context. I mean, if a poet did this, it would be considered virtuosic because he covers so much ground modally in a way that is really quite unusual. So let's hear the first verse of the song, which will be in narrative mode, storytelling mode.
And I followed her to the station with a suitcase in my hand.
I think he may start this thing out, the whole song, by saying, and I followed her to the station with a suitcase in my hand, which is weird. It makes me feel that there's something left out, that there was a part of the story before this that I didn't hear. So you could imagine here that maybe what's going on is that the woman is about to leave the speaker, the Robert Johnson character, and he's carrying her luggage to the train station. She's about to go. That's one way of reading it. It makes me feel that it was too painful to say what happened. It's more powerful than if he had said what happened because it expresses this unspeakability of the painful event. Then we get these lines.
Well, it's hard to tell when all your love's in vain. All my love's in vain.
Well, it's hard to tell when all your love's in vain. All my love's in vain. It's like there's a kind of irresolution there. Like, it's hard to tell, Is all my love just futile? Like, is it no point? Yeah, it is. Because he says, it's hard to tell when all your love's in vain. All my love's in vain. So he just owns up to it. We're in storytelling mode, but it's a little unclear because the song doesn't really say who's about to get on the train. I think that's going to become significant. Let's keep listening.
When the train rolled up to the station.
When the train pulled up to the station.
I looked her in the eye.
I looked her in the eye.
When the train rolled up to the station, and I looked her in the eye. Well, I was lonesome, I felt so lonesome, and I could not help but cry. All my love's in vain.
I was lonesome, I felt so lonesome, I could not help but cry. It makes me think of Hank Williams Sr., I'm so lonesome I could cry. Very similar line there. And then he comes back with the big hook line, all my love's in vain. All right, so storytelling mode, narrative mode, setting the scene. Still unclear who's going to get on the train. All right, and then we get to the third verse, which for my money is just one of the finest things in all of music and in all of lyric writing. I mean, it's a weird, very strange, very evocative verse, and he's going to switch to lyric mode here. We're going to go into the world of lyric poetry and really lean into imagery in a strange way.
When the train left the station with two lights on behind. Well, the blue light was my blue, and the red light was my mind. All my love's in vain.
When the train had left the station with two lights on behind, well, the blue light was my blues, and the red light was my mind. All my love's in vain. I mean, what could be better than that? I know I would have been super happy to have written those lines. Back in the day, these trains, on the caboose, there would be these marker lamps. There'd often be a red one and a green one. The red one marks that, okay, this is the caboose, this is the end of this train. The red light, you might think, signifies finality. It's the caboose, it's the end of the train. But then the green light, the blue light, says, oh, no, there's more coming. And so when you're going through a really painful experience that has to do with finality, like a breakup, you're contemplating the end of something. But it's really not the end because the grief is going to keep coming at you in waves. Also, we just think about, the blue light was my blues, so he's thinking about his sorrow, his heartbreak. But also the red light was my mind is a tremendously evocative image, isn't it? And you think of the red as negative emotion like fear, maybe rage, and just emotional intensity. In general, I was talking to my brother about it. He made a good point. He said, well, Greg, I mean, remember how back home when we were growing up, everybody would talk about the blues as the devil's music, and the devil's associated with the color red. And this is particularly relevant in the case of Johnson because there was all this lore around Robert Johnson that he did absolutely nothing to discourage because it was good marketing for one thing. There's all this lore that Robert Johnson, around the idea that Robert Johnson sold his soul to the devil. So he was closely associated with the devil, and so that red light was my mind might be related to that. These two lines, that when the train, it left the station with two lights on behind, the blue light was my blues, the red light was my mind, makes me think of a poem by Ezra Pound. Robert Johnson recorded this song in like 1937. 2 or 3 decades before, in 1911, Ezra Pound, an American poet, had published In a Station of the Metro. So it's also set in a station. It's also highly imagistic. It goes, the apparition of these faces in a crowd, petals on a wet black bough. So I often think of that poem in juxtaposition with these two lines from Robert Johnson. And I also think of a poem by the great Irish poet Yeats, who's actually a friend of Pound's. Yeats has a poem called The Song of Wandering Angus, which I highly recommend. You can find either one of these two poems very easily online. The Song of Wandering Angus starts with an image that puts me in mind of this Robert Johnson. I went out into the hazelwood because a fire was in my head. That idea of the fire in your head makes me think of the red light was my mind. Saying all my love's in vain, it grounds you emotionally, but it doesn't destroy the mystery of the blue light was my blues and the red light was my mind. You still have the mystery there and that kind of evocative, enigmatic quality, but then you get this big line that brings everything home emotionally. And it makes me think of something I read about John Lennon. I read that Lennon studied advertising slogans because he smartly perceived that there was an affinity between advertising slogans and big hook lines in songs. And he wanted those big lines. And we see that across the Beatles catalog. This is going to be our last verse in the song.
Willie Mae. In
the last verse, you get these kind of cries from deep in the person's heart, you know, and there seems to be a change here in mode. So we started out in narrative mode, storytelling, and here he was using third person. He's talking about the woman. I followed her to the station. Not I followed you. If he said I followed you, that would be second person. He's addressing the person directly. But here in the beginning, he's talking about her. I followed her to the station. I looked her in the eye. But here at the end, he seems to be crying out to Willie Mae. So if that's the case, that would be a move to dramatic mode where he's addressing her like a character on stage in a play. We hear something about Robert Johnson singing that I think makes him particularly effective with 1930s recording technology. You know, it's not like they had a Neumann U87 for you gearheads out there, like some like highly detailed condenser mic that was catching every little breath. And so some voices might not have functioned as well in that environment, but Johnson's did, because he has a lot of voice in his voice. Do you know what I mean? Like there's more voice per unit of breath than in some other singers' voices. It's he has a great print, as they say in music production, like the microphone loves him. And before we wrap it up, I want to say something, and we'll come back to this question of narrative. So at the end there, I said, you know, that he almost becomes inarticulate. It's actually it's super expressive, but the inarticulateness is by design to show that like language is not adequate to express what I'm feeling. You know, it just kind of melts into this cry. And one way of reading that is that we're back to the unspeakability that we started the song with. We started with and left out the most significant event of the story, which is that she told me it's over. And at the end, we just get these cries, not an actual account of what's going on. So he begins the song and ends the song by not saying the thing. Because he never gets around to saying what happened, there is this ambiguity, and I actually think it's functioning in the song's favor. Who got on the train? If I'm just listening to the song and reading the lyrics, I'm thinking that Willie Mae, the woman, is the one who was getting on the train. Because notice in that beautiful third verse, when the train it left the station, 2 lights on behind. It sounds like the speakers were standing there on the platform at the train station watching that train ride away. I saw an interview with Willie Mae herself. She said, you know, me and Robert courted for like 7 months, and then he said he had to go. He had to go make records. Like he was the one that left. Heck, he said he was going to make records. He might have been coming to Dallas to record Love in Vain, this very song. It made me think of something I think songwriters do. This is something I've done. I've noticed that if I'm writing about a parting of the ways, like let's say a breakup, sometimes I will be experiencing a kind of dual heartbreak because I'm thinking about my own sadness. Even if I'm the one that left, there's still sadness, you know, in the end of a relationship. And I'm experiencing my own sadness, but I'm also thinking about the other person's heartbreak. And that's adding to the pain. And I'm putting myself in that other person's shoes. And it's almost like that's happening here in this song, that the Robert Johnson character, he's experiencing both things, and the song doesn't nail it down. It never says I was the one that got on the train. It never says she was the one that got on the train. And that ambiguity, I think, is making the song even more powerful. For me, it's one of the most important songs that I've ever come across. And I've learned a lot about writing songs, writing lyrics in particular, from this track. And I hope that the discussion we had today has helped you see it in a new way if you're a longtime fan of the song, or if you've never heard the song, then I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did enjoy the video, please give it a like and subscribe. That would help the channel out a lot, and I really appreciate it. Thank you all for being with me today, and I'll catch you in the next one.